Hello techies, I'm Divya here. On behalf of CyberBrainer, don't you think the world of tech is evolving faster than ever? Now is the perfect time to dive in and build the skills that will take you places. With CyberBrainer, we are putting you in the driver's seat of your own future. We at CyberBrainer don't just teach your interest. We believe that knowledge is power, but it's applied knowledge that truly sets you apart. Whether you're diving into data science, mastering artificial intelligence, or exploring the world of cybersecurity, our courses are designed to give you the skills that matter. So let's jump into the session and make the future yours today. Thank you.
There are two sections. One is a namespace and identify namespace identifier. Namespace is one. It is a category. Which category of error? It is database, category of file or gems, whatever HTTP. It is about a category of error. Identify and defines the inside that category what actual error is. In Vue, there we can handle error at 3 levels. Application level, flow level. Flow and process of level. This differentiation is very important for Mr. Application level means for multiple flows. In your new project, you have global flows. For multiple flows, we can define one error handler. This error handler is a name. We will use some name to say this is global. The name of this error handler is global error handler. This error handler refers instead of the flow. If you refer the error handler is the global, this flow level means for each flow has separate error handler section. If you define error handler, error handling logic in the flow specified space that is called process level means we will grab the processor inside the try block. The try block has dedicated error handler section. Last time you called it component level. Is it the same? Component level, processor level. We will grab processors inside this try block, and if any error, workers come to a try block. One quick question. I think it's clear. You explained very well application level and flow level or process level. That's good. I understand. I think I remember how you defined the error handler in the flow level and the component level or process level. But I forgot how do you define the errors in application level. I'll show you right now. One moment. I'll show you. Because when you drag the listener, that is the flow level, isn't it? Yes, the flow level. Well, how do you do it in application level? We'll understand about error handler. Assume error handler is a big container. Container, right? Error handler is a container. Which contains what? Which contains error handler's ports. Error handler is a container that contains error handler spokes. Inside the scope, we will define our error handling logic. What to do when error occurs? That logic will be defined inside the error handler spokes. There are two types of spokes. One is on error, continue on error 13 is spoke and on error propagates. We want to define error handling logic directly into error handler. We won't define error handling logic directly into error handler. Rather, we define the error handling logic inside the scope. The first point in the demo. See, even let me. This is error handler. This is error handler. The box I want to highlight. I can't define directly over here. I can't define some logger. Are you sharing another screen? I'm only see the board. I only see the board. I'm using this code for first time. I'll be sure. I'm not sure. This flow, this is called error handler. The one highlight over here. But this is a flow level. Flow level. Error handler. Right. But I can't directly put log over here. This is not a load. This is only error handler section. Error handling section. But I can't put logic directly over here. What it contains. What the error handler contains. It's only error handler scope. It contains error handler scopes. What are the scopes? There are two kinds of scopes. We'll see the difference. One is on error continue or on error propagate. We can track this, scopes. And inside the scopes I can define my error handle. I have a question. And I understand right. You explain more about what contains error handling scope. But this right now is error handling flow. And I don't know if you could maybe take a few seconds. Where is the application one? I'm coming to that point. Alright. Here there is. You can see something over here. Error handler. I can write this error handler and put over here. This has some names. See, the name of this error handler is error handler. Some error handler concept error handler. Something I can make is small, like I can do something. I think you read it. I'm giving this name as global error handler. I can directly put logic over here. Like when I put the directory for flag over here, these are all. What is this container? What is contains? The same one. But this is the same one as the one on the top. But this is flow level. This error handler doesn't require a name. It's inside the flow. Inside the flow. It doesn't require a name. I think they're both inside the flow, but one is. This is also the flow. But they are. Alright. That's inside the flow. This one is inside the application. Inside the application. Something about this. This is not inside the flow. This is an independent entity, independent error handler. Alright, where this is only for dedicated for this flow only. Got it. This logic is for handling errors occurring in this flow only. It won't bother erroring. Errors occurs in other parts of application. This flow scope error handler. This is global error handler application scope error. We can refer this one anywhere in any flow. We can come on here. I can do one thing right now. Can you give another flow? See, this is the click on the error handler section, right? The reference. He is asking for reference. If I open here, I can see all global error handlers in the board here. Right now, my application contains only one global error handler. It's showing up. If I select like this, what happens? This guy is referring this error handler. If any error occurs in this flow, the control comes over here. There are some components that don't come with the error handler. Right? What is the last? The one that you dragged about for the last time? The one that was pointing to the global one. The scheduler. Scheduler is just a photo. Scheduler has its own error handler. Scheduler has its own error handler. And it is a flow actually. It's not scheduler. See, it's a flow. In the source the scheduler is. We can't get the schedule in the source. The flow has an error handler section, right? If you pick on the error handler section, it is asking for reference. Means, are you referring any global error handler? That's what he was asking. If you don't want to refer a global error handler, what we do? We can expand this one and we can define error handling over in this group. Either we need to refer the global error handler or we can define error handling logic for this flow. Locally, we can define error handling logic for that flow. Right. But right now it's empty. And say that we have a log. Can you put a log or something under the scheduler? If we do that, then that's the component to load. This error handler, it won't ask either to use a global or its own error handling. How do they know? And like we create a unique name. If we say that, for example, if we say this is there will be error, use a local error handler or its own local error handler and not a global one at all. How do we define that? Now, what is this flow name? Error handling concepts flow, right? I go to the error handling concept flow. This is a flow start from here and from here. If you see, there is error handler defined over here. This is inside the flow. See that the flow hands over here, right? Let's say the handler defined inside this one. If any error occurs, this table take care. There is no name over here. See, there is no name. I didn't give any name over here, right? And let me see one more difference. See, this is what this error handling concepts flow to the name of this flow. But not just doing error, handler reference referring global. If you see the code of that flow error handling concept, flow to error handler ref means referring to. Did you pick the global error handler? Did you associate it to this or it did? Ex- no, I show you actually. I think I can do this one. Initially it's like this. I associated that one. But to de-associate, I can go to here, and on the right I can show you how to associate. The difference is see the reference. Somehow you can see there is no error handler over here, right? If we click on this blocks, it is asking for reference. Alright. If I select that one, what happened? I'll put there. Reference global error, right? Like that. If you wanted its own global, its own error handler for this, like the concept flow too, then what do you do? Either you do it for global or local, not both. I know. How do you make it local? Then we go over here and remove that one. Remove the reference. You clear the new one. Just remove the reference. That's it. And clear the new one. Now come over here and the remove reference is gone. Now add your logic. Add the random source. Then on area. Another content. That's it. It's become local now. It's local. I know it's very important topic. It's very important. And and you have to really good at it, but how hard it is to learn. It's easy. For some reason it feels like it feels like a overwhelm, like because many components and many flows, and you have to take all the flows into the errors into account. And I don't know. I think I understand it very well. The only thing is that every time I create a flow, we have to you have to take it into account. And then every time you have a component, you have to take it into account. And then we also have a global. I understand it very well. And I'm thinking, I don't know, is this like, I don't know, maybe it's tedious work, a lot of. We discussed about the handle. What is the other hand? Other hand is a container. You can put in local or local. I like that. This is a box container, whatever it contains. There are handles. There are handles the container that contains other handle. If I put this other handler box inside the flow, that becomes flow-based area handler. If you remove that box from the flow and put outside, it becomes lower other handler. If I put the same box inside the price code, that becomes component lower other hand. But box and box contains the spokes. Now what are the scopes? Why the scopes? I think that's the question. Each scope is defined to handle error. Each scope will define some to handle some error. In your logic you are defining some logic. In your logic, what are doing is what your requirement is. We get a request from the postman or some client. Some client will do request to us. The first activity we need to do is we need to write that request, whatever payload that is coming from the client. That payload we need to write to find. Write to find the first activity. And second activity is you need to insert a recorded database. Whatever things that come, that will be inserted in database. Insert to B. And finally, if database is successfully inserted, write the confirmation to JMS successful inserted line. If you have any database failure to insert to database something, that the result we need to write to JMS. That is your business requirement. Now you are coding that one. First you write to file and you insert it to database. This is file component you write into file. Afterwards your database insert. And finally JMS publish. Three activities you are doing inside the program. Now how many types of errors we may encounter while executing this program? The chance of getting errors. How many types of how many? You know what is it? What are the chances? 1, 2, 3, 4. We may get the failures. We may get database errors. We may get JMS error. To handle each kind of category, we define a box. This is every handler. Every hand is a box. There's a box is there. Inside this box, to handle each kind of category, we define a scope. This scope is responsible for handling file errors. And another scope is responsible for handling database errors. And another scope is responsible for handling JMS errors. It is not always like that. You can put one scope and you can handle all the errors in single scope also. It's also possible. Then why scope is? Scope is intended to handle the actual error. In each scope, we can configure a scope. What error you're going to handle? I can configure this scope to handle that kind of error. If I don't have occurs, control comes over here. If anything I don't have occurs in the database, control comes to the second block. JMS occurs, control comes to third block. What I do is each error I can handle in a separate way. In whatever you know, the requirement demands, right? I got the fixable today. That's good. But basically show me. There are many namespaces in the file. In also database, there's many different areas in each scope. That's the challenge. That I can show you right now how to add that one, how to consider the right of scopes, but not try to understand what is the scope. Actually, what is error handler means? Error handler is simple box that contains scopes. First point, the scope is intended to handle some error. Now we will understand about on error, continue on the propagate, and why you can show the demo. On error continue and on other propagate. What are these? The types of scopes. I told the two types of scopes, right? One is on error continue the kind of scope. and other propagate kind of scope. Propagate. What your requirement is, what your boss says he had up, you need to develop some functionality, right? You got to request write. That request your file afterwards, write to database and write to publish. And the condition is, even if writing to the file fails, some reason, maybe the file is not available or some network issue, something you should find. You need to continue and try to database. Don't you know, return error. Even the file operation fails because this is, you feel, the business fees. This is not much. But that is not much, even it fails. It doesn't matter. I need to go ahead and continue database operation. Usually what happens, it will do that, right? Can you see the last part? I understand that an error to continue. The second one is an on-error propagate, right? That means what? To propagate means, if error occurs, stop the execution. Both ways you can stop, but propagate means the error will throw back to the client. Continue. Also send back to client, but continue returns success response. We just propagate it and send error response. On other continuous, that means I have to keep we know the error with capture, but application will continue though. The request will continue. There is some exception. You said, I'm confusing. I'm sorry. Whenever an error occurs in any component at the flow level, for some error, you got error writing to file. The file is not accessible. It stopped the execution in the case itself. It won't move forward. What happens? It comes to the this on continuous code. If I'm handling the file errors in continuous code, it might be continuous code or propagate scope. I can choose anything, but I am handling in a continuous code. What happens is all the processors inside the continuous code is executed and the response sent to client. But that response is success response. The 200 status for me, success response is sent back to client. Even error vectors, it comes to continue block and these continuous execution and success response into back to client. If I am handling the file error in a on error propagate scope, for example, propagate scope also, control comes over here. Whatever you define, it will be scooted over there, but it will send this error object to the client. It won't send a continuity. And then when he sends back to the information to the client about the error, then he will not execute anymore. It will stop. In both the cases, it stops only both the cases, even another, continue, also the file after the file. It won't execute this one and this one. This both are not yet executed. It lands into this scope. This scope will execute and the response is sent back to client. I will stop. Let me tell you one more thing. I can try about this to honor the property of the container. Some log. I write here. And if I show you the configuration, this is very simple. In this configuration, I configured at the port 8081. And there is no path. There is no very simple. And there is some set payload. I put some payload like a stop or something like that. And here, whatever is I'm doing, some is typical. What's typical? I'm calling abc.com/abc, actually the severe one. This URL is not exists in the world. I will definitely get error. Right. Then you'll log it. It will go to this logger. Let me debug this one. I have a question. I have a user. You said in error handling you cannot log it. You cannot the log. You cannot. I thought you said that error handle section. The only thing that you can go there is the on the two scripts of error handling. But it looks like you have a log here. Is that just because you give me example, two schools, right? Let me show you the school. What is school handling? I need to do any type over here, right? But school you choose on error propagate, right? But inside there it has a logger. I put some log. I just want to log. I want to log this one. I can put anything. My understanding was that at an error handle instruction, you can only put either on propagate or on continue. See, this is a box. But the one this box is what? On a propagate. Inside there you can put anything. Go ahead. See you run. See, no control is over here. See, there is no error actually. But the thing is, I did execute this request. I'm saying I'm right. It can be that one. What happens? I did. Now it will see the red border, right? See, I got an error. Now you say what the error is of. I see. I see that. And if we go inside over here, and there is a parent, there is some hierarchy. Actually, HTTP forbidden is a child of HTTP client security. It is a child of new client security. It is a child of new client security. And finally, new one is a parent one. And new one is any kind of parent. I can show you this hierarchy. This is not just for your knowledge purpose. See this error type. HTTP is a namespace. And forbidden is an identifier. Now, if I move forward, control comes to honor the propagate scope. See what happens. And if I click once again, what happens is I will get CFR. And HTTP some payload. How I got that payload is you put that in the log. Log only writes to the error record by sending the request. This slide comes to log. And log puts it. I got this one. The error record was sent in the request. Log opens. You only see the console. And I'll quote CFR. Error record. I got this response. Can you go back to the flow? The error handling, the error message in the log. The log, if you go to log here, error record was sent in the request, right? That becomes what? That's error message, right? You log. And that's what the postman get it back. You know log files. Log files are there. First, if any error occurs, what we do? We check the log files first. This one writes the log. It said the error code right. Let me show you the log file. It's actually what is our application name? Our application name is this is our application name. There are any concepts. There is a I call inside the apps. There are any concepts. Inside the app. Find the log site logs. Find. This is the file actually. I can show you. Log. The one I write is you can see that. That is log file. And that's what he had on the log. And is that what we call a postman gets back as well? No, that's what I'm explaining. How postmen get that one. This is the guy, right? What is this? This is talking with the postman. Whenever it's under request that is first received by the listener. Is there? What is there? We'll do this, that will change to you. Live in time. The new event is given to sector component and this process will happen. At last, that will be the event is given to this. And this is not again transformed back to the HTTP response and that's response sent back to Postman. Is that clear? Now we'll be sending response back to Postman is listening, sending response back to Postman. If I put a listener, if I click on the listener, and you can see response section over here. I put a response section. What response I'm sending? I'm sending payload as a response back to Postman. See here. Sorry, not body. There is some response, error response actually. Error response means I'm sending payload as a response to the Postman. Here I'm setting some response. What period I'm setting is the period I'm setting. Before request operations. This is a payload. I said before getting error. That error will go to the client actually. But actually this is a modified. I did modify. What I can show you. I can show you what response. Response section. Response section. The error response. It contains error.description. This one. This is here. For this response. The error response section. Instead of payload. The error.description. How I get running. Like I said. The request. They exclude that. There are 4 or 3. There are not a description. What is this description? This is the description. For that one. 4. What? How I am getting output is the listener. That is the response section. The response. If successful responses, go back to Postman. There is error. There is error. It is error. It is whatever. That by default. If you want to change, but by default. Now you can see. The final error is. The error is thrown back to flight. Know what I fixed? Something like dark cyanide. sometime. This is a flow reference. It is a flow reference, that is, let me go see this flow reference different to this flow tool. What is the level of flow reference setup? If flow reference is encountered, all these three components will come and sit over here. It's good over here. Can you say one more time? What happened? That's a flow tool. I am referring to flow tool in this section. It's domain flow. The main flow. This one is called main flow. Main flow. What I am going is, I am referring to the other flow. That name is flow. The flow is like this. First is what I told is, whenever we have a flow reference, whatever the components inside the flow will come and execute at this place. We listen, then the information goes to the flow tool. That is the better expression we can use. All these components will come and execute in this place. Logically, this is flow to flow tool. But this execution is happening in the flow only. Now in the catch is, this flow has ever handled and this flow has ever handled. See the quality of flow. This flow we use the flow to has ever handled and main flow has ever handled. If I configure, then I handle scope like this. This one, what I want to do is I want to handle any, I want to handle any kind of CPA that I want to handle by the scope. If I give any write, what happens? Even if we just database, that is also happening through the scope. But what the requirement is, I want to configure this scope in such a way that it handles all HTTP errors. In that case, what you can configure is, you should not configure this one, you should configure this one. Take me through some expression. What you can do is error. I'll show this one. How to configure this one to handle all HTTP errors. First of all, what it means. That one. How to configure a scope to handle specific kind of error. Focus on one thing, Adam. There are two flow subjects here. The main flow and flow. And the error occurring in the flow. Let me get it right. No pretty excluding. This one right. The control comes to the 7. Now, what kind of error is actually a non-error propagator? The propagator handle propagates the error to the calling for the main flow. If I click over here, what happens is there is propagator over here and here to the propagator. From here, this is my building. The subflow is not subflow. There are two flows with the called flow. The call and calling flow. Both has the error handles but both has the on. Error propagates to the handle. Error is propagated from calling flow to calling flow to calling flow to client. It is popular. It is posed back from here to here, here to client. For example, if I configure this error handler as a on error continue, the flow to what I am doing is, I am configuring on error continue. I was going to ask you that. That's nice. Let's see. Let's see what it does. I am blocking something. Error comes here and executing the on error continue. It is not a screw logger component. When error occurs, it lands to the error handler's code. It stops, it is pushed to the flow. It won't move forward. The first one you remember. But don't scope it. When error occurs, the control lands into the error handler's code. The point you need to focus now is, what is the kind of this is on error continue scope? On error continue scope, what happens is the error is not popular to the main flow. When I now move to the next point, what happens is see the control comes to the logger. The flow reference got successfully executed even though error occurs. This continuous scope not written the error to the main flow. That's what the error continues. Exactly. it moved to the next component. But if, when it was propagate, it didn't go logger, it came to the flow back. Give it back to the listener. In the previous example I showed you, it is propagated. Error propagated to flow reference and error propagated to this level. And this executes. And what reference, what value we get? Even though it got error message. Even though it error means see, this has to continue. Whatever is error is propagated to the main flow. Error is not propagated to main flow. There is no error, it is executed successfully. Logger is excluded and it is. But how can we hunt? Because remember we were requesting a bad URL. And that bad URL is supposed to be like, you cannot. It's supposed to go like a forwarder tree of, 500 whatever. Then that was a bad error message. And then when it comes back to that's what the error continue did in a flow tool. And when it passes back to the logger, it's supposed to print and the error message. Right. I'm afraid to correct some messages. Right? I know the log. It brings to whatever you have a log. But in this time, it's not reporting correctly what the error message was. Just because the reason is on error continue, they could propagate. There is pop back to the main flow from the, where it has occurred. It is propagated back to main flow, but error is not propagating from this flow to this flow because of this one. I have a crazy question. And is there like a custom error handle in Mule where you were lucky you're like your code or like your write-up script? Like, if this do this, if this do this. Is that common? Step common says yes. But most probably managed this one. Is this like this error? I know that error and error, the two scopes of error handling in Mule that you showed me, like error to continue or error handle propagate, is the concept that MuleSoft and offer is right. Exactly. And I think that's good to know that. But and I'm thinking in real world, you might see a lot of you may have a different way, a customized way of doing it, of handling this. There are certain conditions that you want to continue, certain conditions that you want to, and propagate. I don't know, but I'm thinking out loud here, and I'm thinking that we people like you who have done this long, do you don't depend on error, continue on error. You might come up your own way of doing error handling. That's not common. It's very rare. Much customized requirement. We define some kind of error handling framework for each project. And that we follow that framework. We define some framework, the customer framework, but that contains this component, the other propagator and the other continue. Alright. We'll get to that one. And Brian, thank you. That's good. This really is important subject, and I hope you know. Once we use a real project that we will, I'll have some better idea how to utilize this. But I understand the concept wise, the scope of error handling and how to use them. How is you? To summarize, we have error handler. Error handler is simply a box. It contains error handler. We put this box outside of flow and inside of flow. We put inside of flow, it becomes local flow, local. If it's outside of flow, that's flow. This box contains error handler scopes. Each scope is intended to add some errors. That's right. The two kinds of scopes, that is, one is continuous scope. One is propagate scope. A propagate scope in propagate error. Back to client who called this. That's right. And a continued scope won't send an error. This block will execute. And the output of this block execution. This may send back to client success response. Continues to present, send error back to client, whereas propagate scope sends an error back to your client. That may be a flow that is calling this, that is referring this flow. Maybe another flow that is referring this flow. Maybe a client application that is calling this flow. Whatever, when the request comes to this flow, right? Propagate will send an error back to the caller, whereas continue won't send the error back to caller. That is the main fundamental number. Alright. And each scope, whether it may be propagate or continue, will configure what we configure. We configure. Error means this scope is capable to handle that error. Right. You have any meeting now? Was that you have any meeting? You have anything now? No, I think I'm good. I'm good for next 15 minutes. Sounds good. Thank you. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel.